All right. This is the first hand of the Bronze Star tournament. Sure, go ahead, blow up our time bank right away in the first hand. I believe there should be a kick vote for these time bank wasters. And the players around the table can vote. Kick him out of the hand. Oh boy, today we are hating everybody, aren't we, Kumar? Yes, we do. We hate everybody and everything. I think it's the days where you shouldn't play poker. If you don't want to hurt your bankroll, you shouldn't play poker on these days with these moods. Oh boy. How much is 25 plus 55? 80, right? 80 cents. Oh, I lost more than I wanted to. Why should I call this? Tell me one reason to call this. Pot odds. Should have raised it. What do they have? 7, 8 or deuce? 7 deuce? Oh, of course, you've got them. All them. Bruno Akkari. I know that player. He wants the blinds. Not flush, wow. Oh, this is a turbo, right? Yes. Queen Jack. In a turbo tournament, you have to act quickly. You have to double up rather quickly. Let's start with it. Queen Jack is good enough. Three. 4, 5, call. I suck badly. At least I made it above average now. There is an all-in from a loose player. I may call him. Oh no. I almost had him. Almost. Ace 10. Suited on the button. All right. Almost had the flush. Eat me. Eat my shorts. Eat my short stack. Okay. Oh, would be a good flop for me. I'll watch this video.
Okay, welcome to live training. Let's get started.
From Langolier. I have watched it up to about
And I expect to win larger pots when I do win.
here.
I expect to win more money in the space. But that's not necessarily the primary concern here. The concern is to keep the really bad player in your pot with us and not take an action that shuts them out. Okay? So in other words, I mean, whatever the case may be, if, okay, let's say the tag opens for a raise and we're on the button with ace-king. That's kind of a standard in like a cash game, 100 big blind cash game. Fairly standard 3-bet spot. Okay, but if I have a big fish in the blinds, you know, be it a loose passive player or some other type of 4 player in the blinds, I 3-bet less often in that scenario. I'll flat call much more often in position because I know that the loose passive fish in the blind is going to be much more inclined to come into the pot. So, and that's, you know, that's fine for me. Now, that doesn't mean maybe by ace-king I won't win as many pots, but I expect to win larger pots when I do win, and I expect to win more money in the long run. By keeping that bad player in, it's going to make big mistakes. So in other words, if I 3-bet the loose passive player, for an example, if I 3-bet the loose passive player, it's going to fold stuff like, probably fold stuff like king deuce suited. But if I'm sitting there with ace-king, I want them in the pot with king deuce suited. If I flat call, they're going to call and see flops with that. And then when they flop a king, they're, you know, it's not like the regular who's perhaps making a steal move isn't going to lose. If he's got king deuce suited and he's making a steal move and the flop comes king high, he's not going to stack off. He's not going to lose a ton of chips. We'll get some more chips out of him, but he's not going to make a huge mistake in most cases. The loose passive player, he flops, you know, top pair, even though he has no kicker, it's game over. He's going to give us value on all 3 streets. He's not going to be able to extract himself from that situation. Okay. Does that make sense? So we're going to win more money in the long run. Correct. Okay. Could you give more detail on IDing this type of player? Yeah, IDing the loose passive player is pretty easy. They're loose. They're going to try and see a lot of flops, and they're going to generally have a passive approach to their game or their style. Okay? You'll pick them out pretty quickly if you're observing because they'll be involved a lot, and they'll do so with a lot of calling. Call. They'll call when they should fold, and they'll call when they should raise. That's the primary mistake of the loose passive player. Okay, if you're playing online running a HUD, your HUD stats will tell you, you know, pretty quickly. You don't need a very large sample size necessarily. You have 25 or 30 hands, and the opponent's VPIP is 76%. Pretty safe assumption they're loose. You know, if their pre-flop raise is 4%, they're playing 76-4, 20 or 30 hands, pretty easy to see. They're a loose passive player. And you see a lot of stuff like that, like micro stakes. If you're just observing, you'll even see that before your HUD will tell you. Okay? In the sessions I've run in micro stakes for live training, we picked out players like that. I had you know, no data on any players at micro stakes when I ran the sessions, but we did observations and we picked out people right off the bat. Like, we actually identified one opponent as a likely loose passive player after one hand. How did we do that?
Yeah,
How could we make such an identification after one hand?
He was calling.
What do you guys think?
Nothing but calling.
Hand range? We got to see a sample of what they did. The opponent, you know, they limped in under the gun. Then there was a raise behind them, and they called the raise. And then they check called the flop, and they check called the turn, and then they turned over 8-5 offsuit, which had flopped middle pair, and on the river was fourth pair, and it was the first hand. So right away we said, all right, I hadn't even played a hand yet. We said, okay, now we know we got under the gun, this particular opponent. We know they're loose and probably pretty passive. They limped in under the gun with 8-5 offsuit. We know we would expect them to be very loose pre-flop. We don't need a HUD to tell us that. In 30 or 40 hands, their HUD's going to tell us that, but we don't need the HUD to tell us that after seeing the first hand, because we know they limped in under the gun with 8-5 offsuit, and then they flop middle pair and they check called all the way down. Loose passive.
Loose passive player.
All right. What were the sample HUD numbers? Something with a very high VPIP, voluntarily put dollars in pot. It's a pre-flop stat for how often they get involved, and perhaps a low pre-flop raise percentage. So they're getting involved frequently pre-flop, but doing so by calling, whether it be limping in or calling a raise. They're not raising themselves very often. Okay. So the second bullet point we just finished, don't take actions to shut them out of pots. Increase your raise size, and your continuation bet sizing can add additional value against these particular players. Remember, they call too often. So when we have what figures to be the best hand, go ahead and charge them extra. Charge them a premium for making their favorite mistake of calling too often. In this particular opponent, we generally shouldn't be bluffing them on the end if they get to the river. Okay? We generally shouldn't be bluffing them on the end. We may fire a continuation bet at the flop. We raise pre-flop and isolate a loose passive. We may fire a continuation bet at the flop. They call. Okay? We know that they'll probably fold complete air, but they do like to call on the flop pretty loosely. Remember, this player type likes to peel a card. They like to see the turn, see if anything develops. Okay, so we may
watch this later. Have just doubled up, and it is not completely lost. However, I'm still coming last. This is the time where players like me are shoving and doubling up any two cards with any two cards. I should have shoved. Look at that flop. 7-6 offsuit. You think that's a bad hand? Look at this flop. No, the turn comes at 10, and jacks will have the straight. I'm not shoving this. Okay. Close. I think I will I will watch this video to the end, and when I feel like I'm ready to play without destroying my bankroll totally, I will start a stream of a cash game. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you next time.